She is breaking a racial barrier, but is it because her skin is light? These black men and women are ABC News correspondents. Most, as you can see, are light-skinned.
I can remember one time a guy said, well, you know, the only reason you got your job, the only reason you become so successful is because you have lighter skin than I do.
One woman, two photographs, one light and one dark.
The dark-skinned woman to you suggested that she looked like a prostitute.
For some reason, it just, with her skin tone and the darkness of it, it just looked more, I guess, slutty than it did with the lighter-skinned woman.
Tonight, America in black and white. Shades of prejudice.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
Earlier this week, Walgreens, the nation's largest drugstore chain, stepped into a racial issue that is rarely discussed in public, perhaps because it is still so enormously sensitive. The drug chain had issued a Black History Month coupon book, which contains specials on skin bleach and hair relaxer. There clearly were times in this country's history when some of its African-American citizens wanted to straighten their hair or lighten their skin tone, if only because it might make life a little easier in a society as racist as America once was. But why now? Walgreens' response, which is interesting in itself, was first to apologize, but then to note that the products being advertised were those with, quote, a high frequency of purchase in the black community. And indeed, it turns out that skin bleach, sold almost exclusively to black women, is still a $44 million a year industry. Two of our African-American colleagues, producer James Blue and Nightline correspondent Michelle McQueen, had been proposing a story on skin color for some time. There remains within the African-American community a strong perception that, to this day, conditions in America are such that lighter-skinned blacks have an easier time and are more likely to succeed than darker-skinned blacks. How much of a foundation that perception has in reality is what this program is about tonight. Here's Michelle McQueen.
What's wrong with this picture? When it was published, with O.J. Simpson's natural skin color darkened by an artist, it was denounced as racist. Except what's so bad about being dark? And what's so right about this picture? This year's Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition is being touted as a racial breakthrough because Tyra Banks is on the cover by herself.
She's just a beautiful woman. Everything about her is attractive.
She's classy, she looks seductive, and she's a gorgeous woman.
Except most people we talked to didn't seem to notice that she's black.
Her complexion is light enough that she could be white woman with a tan, or she could be just about any race, I guess.
Most African Americans used to grow up learning this sad little playground rhyme. If you're white, you're right. If you're brown, stick around. If you're black, stay back. The meaning is clear. The lighter skin, the better. The better the job. The easier it is to get along with whites. It's called colorism, prejudice based not just on race, but on skin tone. And although most people have probably never heard the word, the evidence suggests that decisions based on skin tone are still being made, consciously or unconsciously, every day.
Oh, just look at her.
Why, for example, was the light-skinned Vanessa Williams the first black Miss America? And why do the image-making industries, like Hollywood and advertising, decide that some people are the epitome of glamour?
It's the new reality in color.
And others are objects of ridicule.
In fashion, racism is live. You know what I mean? Yeah, I mean, you just have to know that.
Beth Ann Hardison was one of the first dark-skinned models to work for a white designer in the 1960s, in the midst of the Black is Beautiful movement. She still remembers the ugly comments that followed her on her first trip down the runway.
When I came out, the people began to make a lot of comments slowly. And every time I came out, it became more and more apparent that it was something that I was that was not sort of normal. They were discussing me.
Now Hardison represents fashion models. She says dark models no longer get the rude reception she did, but they still don't get much work.
White people really are enthralled with themselves. They look at themselves every day in the mirror, they brush their teeth, they see them, that's who they see, that's who they're talking to, that's who they're working for, that's who their images is towards. They're not thinking, oh, black, they're not thinking equal, they're not thinking inclusive, they're not.
How then to explain the appeal of Tyson Beckford, now under contract with Ralph Lauren? Hardison says Beckford is the rare exception.
You're going to have to really find someone who's going to really, that they're going to say, whoa, look at here. People say to me, did you know when Tyson came in your door that he was going to be all that he's going to be? I didn't see it at all.
Very tall, has long, like golden, dark blonde hair.
All right, ciao, bye-bye.
Tyrone Barrington, an agent for one of New York's leading model agencies, believes the situation is even worse for women.
All right, bye-bye.
Do you have a harder time getting work for your darker skin models?
In fact, darker skin models really don't make as much money as the lighter skin models. It's a very touchy situation, and it's a very touchy subject.
Consider this basic arithmetic. According to Barrington, a lighter-skinned model may get 3 days of catalog work, the bread and butter of the business, for every 1 day a dark-skinned model will get.
You did a good job. Great. Keep it up. I think we have it.
And Barrington believes that his British accent and the fact that he works mainly with white models encourages clients to be more honest than they might be otherwise. That's why he thinks some magazines feel free to tell him not to send black models at all.
You will hear people say, oh, she's too strong, or he's too strong, or he's too, too ethnic. Stuff like that, terms being used constantly.
I've definitely lost work because of my skin color. I mean, today I should be, shooting for Vogue, but, another Nikki Taylor, someone else is doing it because the colors aren't right.
Beverly Peel, a Barrington client, has been a top runway model since the age of 12. But she has been repeatedly passed over for the most coveted work, magazine covers and makeup contracts. Typical, she says, are ads like this one, where the camera lingers on the white and light-skinned models while the dark one flashes by.
It messes with your ego. You walk around like, oh, well, nothing has changed, from way back in the days, you know what I mean?
Right.
But there is compelling evidence that more is at stake than ego, in fields far beyond fashion. A 1990 study found that for every $1 a lighter-skinned black person earned, a darker-skinned black person earned 72 cents, about the same ratio as there is between the earnings of whites and all blacks. A 1995 study found that very light-skinned men earned an average of $6,000 more a year than very dark-skinned men. And differences among women were even greater, with very light-skinned women earning an average of $9,000 more a year than very dark-skinned women, although the education levels were nearly identical.
If more people don't place blacks on television, in media, forms of magazines, the more people think they're not to be there. And the more you get used to not being part of it. And the more little kids want to grow up being white.
So he waits, I jump in, and then when I get to right here...
Even someone like Tyson Beckford, for whom being black and beautiful has been a gold mine.
It was cool to be light-skinned. And at the time, I often wished I was light-skinned, but now I wouldn't trade it for nothing. I love being dark-skinned. Love being black.
In a moment, whatever happened to that mantra from the 60s that black is beautiful? The long history of prejudice where you might not expect to find it when we come back.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Tylenol PM.
It's called being color-struck, trying to maintain the color, wanting some cream in your coffee. The issue of black-on-black skin color prejudice, or colorism, is one of the dirty little secrets of black America. And yet a secret that is so widely shared, it informs everything from this blues hit from the 40s.
If you's white, she's all right. If you's brown, stick around. But if you's black, brother, get back, get back, get back.
To this Spike Lee movie from the 90s, School Days, which confronts the issue head-on.
Pickaninny, Barbie doll, hi yellow heifer, tar baby, wanna be white, jigaboo.
It's something that's imposed
from the outside that was started to be imposed during slavery on, where the lighter people were seen as more like white people and therefore more worthy of being in the middle.
Author Bell Hooks has written extensively on issues of race and culture.
It makes perfect sense that people in their jobs, particularly in government and in other public institutions, feel like if you have a lighter-skinned black person, white people will feel more at ease. And because we've internalized racism as black people, many of us feel more at ease as well.
It seems hard to believe that black people adopted the same racial caste system from which they suffered under whites. But it is true, and not so long ago, it was a painful and sensitive topic.
You don't call anybody black. Never refer to anyone as black, because you might get whipped if by that person if you call a person black. So that was self-protection.
The system built around that created this dichotomy between dark-skinned blacks and light-skinned blacks, the house black versus the field black.
Light-skinned African Americans tended to group together to the exclusion of people who were of a darker complexion. Historically, that is Charleston.
To get to the root of black-on-black color consciousness, we came here, to the southern port city of Charleston, South Carolina. Before the Civil War, blacks far outnumbered whites here, and although white slaveholders kept an iron fist on black life, there was a sizable population of free blacks. Historian Bernard Power says they were almost all light.
To look at a person who was dark, indeed a person who was black, the assumption could very easily be made that that person was a slave. Lighter complexioned persons had a greater chance of being free.
This free population served as a buffer between the slaveholders and the slaves, says Powers, because they were literally a combination of the two, the offspring of whites and slaves, with all the advantages that implies.
It made their lives very different from the life of the average slave. Free blacks were able to maintain their own families.
And they created their own institutions. St. Mark's, founded in 1865, was the church for the free blacks.
In order to be eligible for membership, you had to pass the comb test, which meant, in other words, that if the comb didn't slide through your hair, then of course you were not admitted.
Calvary, founded in 1849 by slave owners, was the church for slaves.
It was also a way of separating the classes, because within the black race, you had the darker blacks and you had the lighter blacks. And basically, the lighter blacks went to St. Mark's Church, and the others went to Calvary Church.
And remarkably, more than a century and a half later, the separations endure, informal but all too visible.
I think it's been a barrier to political progress and economic progress, simply because there have been, because of the lack of relationships between folk of different hues in Charleston. It's in many ways mirrored the relationship between blacks and whites.
Black is beautiful! Free hood!
And then came the 1960s, when all manner of social conventions were turned upside down, including those about black beauty. For the first time, magazines like Ebony and black-oriented movies began to showcase darker-skinned African Americans.
Who's a black private dick that's a sex machine to all the chicks?
Shut! That cultural movement has certainly made a difference in how African Americans treat each other. The question is how much has changed, and whether the rest of the world has changed too.
Just when you may have started to think that skin color doesn't matter as much as it once did, here comes an experiment. We'll have that when we come back.
theory of whether Americans in professions other than fashion and in places beyond the color-conscious South continue to judge people based on skin tone, consciously or unconsciously.
As a white person, I've sometimes been criticized for studying this area because...
A decade ago, DePaul University professor Midge Wilson constructed an experiment to answer this question. She was shocked by what she found out.
We found that there was a positive halo effect around the light-skinned women on various adjectives, like to what extent do you see this woman as popular, socially skilled, likely to be happy in her love life, successful, intelligent, that the light-skinned woman was received higher evaluations in all these areas compared to the dark-skinned woman.
And equally surprising,
the white subjects were not significantly different than the black subjects.
We asked Professor Wilson to show us how she did it, and an introductory psychology class at DePaul agreed to fill out her questionnaire.
Be asked, as it says, as it suggests, to form an impression of somebody, which is something that we do every day, all the time.
Pictures of 3 people, 1 white and 2 black, were distributed to each student. As you can see, there are 2 versions of each African American, one with light skin and one with dark skin. The students were asked to rate each one on qualities such as intelligence, happiness, and earning potential.
Hi.
15 students agreed to talk to us about their impressions and opinions. And despite the widespread belief that younger people are more tolerant and open-minded than the older generation, many of these students echoed the same attitudes Wilson found earlier.
Does she look like a prostitute to you?
Yeah.
Does she look like a prostitute to you?
I think it's the lipstick.
Do you?
Well, I mean, you're right. It does kind of seem like she does more, the darker-skinned one, but...
Why do you think that is?
For some reason, it just, with her skin tone and the darkness of it, it just looked more, I guess, slutty than it did with the lighter-skinned woman.
Just as in Wilson's experiment, many of the students considered the darker people less cordial, less appealing, and less attractive than the lighter-skinned version of the same person.
The African-American lady looked a little bit larger than, let's say, your normal attractive lady.
You thought she'd be less successful?
I thought she would have love problems and emotional problems because, she, you know, a lot of things might go wrong.
She's not overweight at all. In fact, we selected her because she's normal looking, regular looking.
Remarkably, few questioned the notion that sweeping generalizations, such as how a person speaks, can or should be made based on skin tone. Would a lighter-skinned person in that environment have an easier time getting in the door? Why?
Sure.
Why?
I don't know. I mean, maybe because they're closer to being white, or they're looked at as being better educated, or, you know, they speak, I don't know. You know, they speak.
But you've
proper
seen
English.
this. This does not shock you.
No.
It's funny.
In the media, there's a tendency to select lighter-skinned African Americans as models, as movie stars, as journalists in many cases. So you see that thrown up as the, quote, successful ones.
I'm Carol Simpson.
Alexander Johnson.
Carla Davis, ABC News, the White House.
For example, the African-American correspondents at ABC News are overwhelmingly light-skinned, and their personal experiences reflect the enduring power of the subject today.
When I was dating the woman who would eventually become my wife, I was deemed acceptable by her family, mainly because of the color of my skin or the hue of my skin. I was assumed, A, to be someone who would be successful, B, someone who is smart, and C, the babies would come out just right.
I was late getting on camera because I, honestly, you know, as much as I like myself and think of myself as being very much TV, you know, I felt that somehow I wouldn't be accepted because I was too dark.
Your own people wonder if you're black enough. And in many cases in white America, light-skinned or not, you're too black. And so you wind up living in this sort of netherworld.
It's also not just in this country, it's sort of worldwide that there's this belief that lighter skin grants you all these other positive qualities and attributes, and it is scary.
This is so normalized that people do it without thinking, and they feel confident that their judgments are not biased judgments. And that to me is, again, when we think about why can't this end, why can't we get rid of color caste hierarchies, it's because it's just that normal to people.
It is tempting to believe that this issue is only of concern to African Americans, but Professors Wilson and Hooks both agree that a country that routinely rewards and punishes some people by the lightness or darkness of their skin is unlikely to avoid making such arbitrary judgments about everyone else. This is Michelle McQueen for Nightline in Washington.
And I'll be back with a closing thought in a moment. Why, you have to wonder, don't we ever describe the offspring of a mixed-race marriage as being a dark-skinned white? Why is it always a light-skinned black? Actually, that is no mystery at all. White or Caucasian has always been regarded as the standard, the model, the ideal in this country, by those in power, if not necessarily by everyone else. A matter of degree has never been permitted. You were either white or you weren't. The introduction of any other racial characteristics has always been regarded as a pollution of whiteness. That's one side of racism. Tonight we've caught a glimpse of the other side, the notion that introducing some white features into another race is somehow an enhancement. If it didn't have so many tragic consequences, it would be silly. That's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
Nightline is a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.
Celebrity Instagram post that is raising all sorts of questions about beauty and race. Lil' Kim, one of the most successful and influential female rappers ever, revealing a dramatic new look and creating a raging debate. Here's ABC's Deborah Roberts.
I've been gone for a minute, now I'm back with the jump off. Goons in the club, case jump off.
She is the self-proclaimed queen bee of rap. Lil' Kim, who made her mark with her raw rhymes like the jump off. Long before Nicki Minaj, it was Lil' Kim beneath those colorful wigs in videos like Crush on You.
Queen bee, so you best take heed.
And eye-popping music videos like How Many Licks. Lil' Kim's appearance is a big part of her persona, which may explain why the notorious K.I.M. is turning heads again. In a series of pictures she recently posted on Instagram, many say Lil' Kim's virtually unrecognizable as compared to pictures of her in the 90s. Along with her wavy blonde hair, many are commenting that her facial structure appears visibly different. Her nose thin, her skin lighter. The post is sparking an online firestorm, with some speculating whether the image is all due to makeup and camera filters, others convinced she's chemically lightening her skin tone. Like the Oscars, Lil' Kim has even earned the hashtag Lil' Kim So White. The rapper has remained mum on the issue, and her reps didn't get back when we reached out. The images are sparking a big discussion about society's view of ideal beauty and whether women of color are under pressure to conform.
I would say the Hollywood standard of beauty is lighter skin, blonde hair, blue eyes, slender.
Patience Zalanga, a Minnesota photographer, has heard it all for years.
When I first saw the pictures of Lil' Kim, I was really shocked. But then I started thinking about it. As a little girl, I was also one of those black kids that wanted to have lighter skin. And so this transformation of Lil' Kim is really just, it's extreme, but it's not a phenomenon.
In fact, Lil' Kim herself admitted to insecurities about her looks back in a 2000 Newsweek interview, where she opens up about not feeling attractive, stating, "I have low self-esteem. I always have. Guys always cheated on me with women who were European looking. Being a regular black girl wasn't good enough."
Black women and women of color are always aspiring to get as close to white as possible, to fit within those beauty standards.
Critics say the beauty industry's capitalizing on the idea that some young women of color are unhappy in their own skin, thus fueling a multi-million-dollar skin bleaching business in the U.S.
In high school was when I started dabbling in other things such as skin bleaching.
Beauty blogger Jasmine Rose knows all about those over-the-counter skin bleaching products. How far did you go in trying to bleach your skin?
All throughout high school, I had really bad acne, and so I first started off trying to bleach the spots, and then I was like, well, if I bleach the spots? What happens if I bleach my face? And so I started it, and when I went to school a couple times, I got compliments from folks saying, oh, your skin looks brighter, and that was kind of motivation for me to continue doing it.
Patients experimented with bleaching too.
It was like really terrible because every time you put it on, you recognize that you don't like something of yourself, which is my skin color.
Dermatologists warn that many of those creams are only intended for small areas and that using them more broadly can thin the skin and become dangerous.
A lot of the over-the-counter products that are used for skin lightening can contain toxic chemicals that can be really harmful and cause skin cancer and even internal cancers.
Dr. Mohiba Tareen says the appeal of skin bleaching products casts a far wider net than just here in the U.S.
It's actually inundated in Indian society that, creams such as Fair and Lovely and all these things can be done at a young age to lighten the skin tone.
In fact, in 2011, the World Health Organization reported that 77% of women in Nigeria used skin lightening products regularly, as did 40% of women in China, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Korea. This worldwide complexion complex leads some to vocalize their sympathy for Lil' Kim.
Our reaction to Lil' Kim should not be to shame her. What's more important is to address the bigger issue, and that's how white supremacy is so pervasive in the media.
Ironically, Lil' Kim's Instagram post comes on the heels of the other Queen Bee's visual album, Lemonade. And though more dark-skinned women are surfacing as icons of beauty, lighter-skinned women continue to dominate on red carpets and on magazine covers. Some have come under fire for allegedly lightening dark-skinned celebrities, from Gabourey Sidibe to Lupita Nyong'o, something they have denied. Most recently, InStyle magazine was accused of digitally lightening the skin tone of Scandal star Kerry Washington. But the magazine denies digitally lightening her skin, instead blaming her washed-out look on their cover lighting. But the quest to achieve beauty ideals often goes far beyond complexion.
And my tip is not as defined as I would like it to be.
Nearly 2 years ago, we met Kendra Alaya, who was on the hunt for the perfect face.
I just looked in the mirror one day, makeup's not changing, anything's not helping, maybe it's my nose.
Kendra is no stranger to the knife.
I've been to this 3 times.
She was on her 4th attempt at rhino perfection. Kendra was hopeful the surgery would finally give her a reflection she's happy with.
The total cost for the procedure was about $14,000.
I see nothing wrong with it. It's fine. I always thought she was pretty.
Her mom, Sylvia, wasn't sure it was money well spent, worrying that with each nose job, her daughter was erasing her ethnicity.
I'm proud of my blackness. Always been that way. And I don't want to change a thing.
But Kendra insists her nose doesn't define her identity.
How was your trip?
Dr. Ola Slipshinsky specializes in what he calls ethnic surgery, marketing himself to minorities.
Come this way.
He says patients of all races seem to want similar looks.
I certainly have a fair amount of patients that bring me photos of super celebrities that are walking around with either half Caucasian, half African American nose or half ethnic nose.
Kendra tells us she wants to model her new nose on that of Alicia Keys. Just after Kendra's surgery, we check in. How are you feeling?
Physically, I feel fine, a little sore, but I'm recovering.
What are you going for? I mean, clearly you're a woman of color. Do you not want to look like a woman of color?
No, I do. I definitely want to look like a woman of color. I don't think changing my nose is going to make me not look like a woman of color. I'm always going to be black, obviously.
Then, days later, the big reveal.
Let's just see how this... Oh, wow. I like it.
The one you want.
Yeah, it's the one I want.
Her old friend Kimberly's there.
I'm nowhere near the Michael Jackson complex.
In her mind, I'm sure he didn't think so either.
Yet now, more than a year later, Kendra is only content with her nose.
I'm more satisfied than I was with the previous surgeries. I'm not 100% satisfied, but I'm more so along the lines of like 85, 90%.
Telling us if she had the money, she'd have even more work done.
I've thought about having cheekbone enhancements, jaw enhancements, and an eyebrow lift.
As for Lil' Kim, no matter what they say, whether the speculation's true or not, some hope this conversation on beauty will keep going on.
If you still don't get why Lil' Kim having lighter skin, blonde hair, and blue eyes is a big deal, then you are maybe part of the default. And I think that's an important thing to raise.
For Nightline, I'm Deborah Roberts in New York.